That's going to be a problem. You are going to be a problem. Got my little fan, my one fan. That never stops being funny. And we're live at 6:24. I'm a little bit early, but tonight we're talking about the video that I just put up, which is the LS7 intake manifold test. And we ran 3 pretty cool ones, I think, especially given the fact that this was a 700 plus horsepower motor. In fact, I think even the MSD made more than 700, and this was an out of the box MSD. I'm like 99% sure. I want to talk about a lot of different things. One of them is the MSD on the LS7 works very well. So I want to talk about that. And I want to talk about the potential to port that. I also want to talk about the comparison between the high RAM and the carbon, the PTR from the carbon PTR from the guys at Performance Design who do obviously a good job on manifolds. We've run a few of their things, and I'd kind of like to run the cross RAM that they have now, which is pretty cool. So we want to talk about a couple things, and the other thing I want to talk about is I had the thumbnail that I have up, and I'll show that for guys later on. But the thumbnail that I have up is actually the fast LSX HR. So it's, I think, the guys from Performance Design can correct me, or the guys from Fast. I think it's the composite version of that carbon PTR intake manifold. So I think it's a lower cost version because the ones from Performance Design is, full of, it's carbon fiber. It's real carbon fiber. So it has full of carbon fibery goodness, which in and of itself has excellent qualities. So, but I think that the Fast is going to be like that. And so my question is, and this is for the thumbnail, do you think that the Fast should be run so we could see how it compares to that carbon PTR intake manifold? And if there is a difference, the other thing is both of those manifolds, which what leads me, because I've tested the carbon PTR not on the LS7 before, like this one was running with the guys at Brian Tooley Racing. I've tested on the LS3 before. And the other cool thing, and I mentioned this in the video, is the fact that the carbon PTR intake manifold has adjustable runners. Fast has done that now with their LSXR and their LSXRT, because it's just a lid change, and then you can put the adjustable runners however you want, in any of the 3 forms, long and medium or shorts. And although the carbon PTR intake manifold doesn't have the changes that you make with the runner length, are not nearly as dramatic. You don't go from, more than doubling the intake runner length. So but I did test the different runner lengths, and we even removed the lid. Something I mentioned before. I wanted to do that on a couple of the intake manifolds. I wanted to do that on the equalizer when we ran the Brian Tooley intake manifold, or the 2 of them ran the equalizer and the Trinity. Brian tells me that those runners are similar enough that he thinks that if you eliminated the airflow restriction, that they might just end up making the same power. So it'd be interesting to test. I just like running the manifolds and pulling the lid off, because we've done that a couple of times in the past. And one of them was with this carbon PTR intake manifold on the LS3 setup. It would be cool to do that on the LS7 too. If you did gain power, so here's a question for the guys that are here. If you did gain power by removing the lid, did you gain power only from airflow? Like, was that showing you that the throttle body was a restriction? Because one thing you're not going to get anymore is if you're taking your map sensor reading from there, the map sensor reading is going to go to zero vacuum, basically. It's going to go to wide open throttle. It'll go to 100 kPa. So if you had a restriction before and you don't have a restriction now, is the gain from not having a restriction, assuming that was the case? Or what you're also doing effectively is, depending on where the edge of the plenum is that you're removing, how far up it comes, but you're also making it into an individual runner intake manifold. There's no common plenum anymore. So they're all grabbing air individually in the same way that they would if they all had throttle blades in them. But this is even better because they don't have throttle blades to restrict their airflow, because a throttle blade in the center of any of these runners would make that runner flow less. Maybe not by a lot, depending on the blade design, but having none there it also makes it harder to shut off, which you just have to shut the ignition off at the end of the run. That's not a big deal for the dyno because the dyno starts loading it down anyways. It doesn't let it over rev anyways. So you just as the dyno starts grabbing it, you just hit the ignition button and turn it off. But you just hold, like what I did was hold the manifold on, which you don't have to hold it on because when there's very little throttle angle, there's a bunch of vacuum there and there's a lot of surface area. So it's not going anywhere. In fact, you cannot lift that off until you go to wide open throttle. So you go to wide open throttle because we still have the throttle hooked up, or it'd be easier if you had drive-by-wire, which we hardly ever do at Westech. But James does that a lot. In fact, on almost all the motors, they do drive-by-wire. That would make it even easier because when we had to take the lid off, we still had the throttle cable attached to it. But you go to wide open throttle, and then all of a sudden there's no vacuum. Now there's nothing holding the lid on, and you just take a lid and lift it off and set it aside, and then you're at wide open throttle. You let it run through the run. Obviously, you stand back from the dyno so that nothing bad happens. So you're all safe, and you have your protection on and stuff. But that's pretty cool. But the question is, or the point that I made when we were looking at the video is, we saw on the comparison between the high ram, which usually does pretty well. It's a tunnel ram manifold, so it usually does pretty well. The high ram actually does better in the testing that I've done, and probably would be the case here when it has more airflow. Like if they were to have a lid that has 2 of those throttle bodies on it, it would make more power. And what we've done is we take off the single snuffleupagus tube with a single 105 millimeter throttle opening, and replace that with a dual 4-hole deal, and then run 2 4150s. And we run carburetors on it too. And the carburetors will make a little bit more power because they have charge cooling. But even if you put 2, 1000 CFM or more 4150 throttle bodies on there, or I think that they have a dual dominator one too. I think 2000 CFM is probably enough for what you're doing. But when you get more airflow in there with that dual quad manifold, a lot of times it will make power, and especially on something like this that's making over 700 NA power, I think you probably would see something there. And then taking the lid off altogether obviously just completely solves that problem. But it's good stuff. So I think that the high ram, could have done with more airflow, could have maybe done a little bit better. But it did do, because of its runner leg, it did do a little better out at the big end, like out at 7,500. It was where the other one, where the PTR was starting to fall off a little bit, the Holly was still kind of going. I think we'd already reached peak power on both of them, so they were already on the downward side of that curve. But if you want to rev to 8,000, then a shorter runner like the Holly might be a better way to go. And we'll see, maybe if you guys are interested in. They also ran the, I think that they ran the Texas Speed intake manifold, the really short runner one, like a low ram kind of thing. And then a couple of the Brian Tooley manifolds too. They have some of those. And then as short runner deals, obviously they do what they did on the LS3. They're going to lose power down low and pick power up top. So maybe I might do something on that as well. But good stuff on the LS7. This motor was impressive. Especially, I sure like this camshaft a lot better than I like the big nitrous cam that we ran when we ran the LS3 intake manifold. When we ran that L3 intake manifold. Now I've asked Brian to see if he can take and put this stage 4 cam back with the LS3 head. That way we can have a direct back-to-back test between the LS3 head and some intake manifold like his Trinity, and versus the LS7 head and the Trinity. The other issue, as we talked about, is 1.8 rockers. There are 1.8 rockers on the LS7, but only 1.7s on the LS3. So we'll see a difference in lift from there, and guys. But the good thing is guys have stuff to argue about. So you can argue about the LS7, the L7, and the L3. Guys can bicker back and forth about, hey, that you cheated the test because you had bigger rocker ratios, yada, 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 all of that stuff. So very cool testing. So we got to have a poll for tonight because I don't think we had one the other night. Okay, so what do you guys think about this 427? If you've taken a look at the video, do you think it could use even shorter intake runners than the Holly? Like, could we make more peak power if we ran, the 4-inch runner stuff, the really short stuff? Is it going to make more power up on the big end? I'm going to change my thing here a little bit. Should this 427 make more peak power with even shorter intake runners than the Holly high ram? So see what guys have to think. See what everybody has to say. Only thing better than tunnel ram is a carbon tunnel ram. I agree with that. It is impressive looking. There's no doubt about that. So if you're doing if you want the wow factor, then this thing definitely provides that. Although anything that looks new and not junkyard fresh is a big step up from a lot of the things that I do. But still, that is an impressive deal. And carbon fiber is like billet anything for car guys. It's like, I don't know, gets us going. It works. Findlay, Minnesota, or Fridley. I've never heard of Fridley, Minnesota. Welcome. Have you tested a 383 versus a 377? No, I haven't. If you change cam and intake, it'll make more higher RPM power. This cam makes more than the nitrous cam that had more exhaust duration did. Packaging again. Oh, are you talking about the carbon PTR intake manifold? It is. Tunnel rams are hard to package unless you. I'm surprised at how many people run that high ram and with what it does. And not that it's not a good manifold. I just mean that they have to do something with the hood. You have, portion of that manifold is definitely going to stick out of the hood. The Fogan intake manifold? Is that the sniper one? The sniper intake manifolds, every one that I've tested, they're all the same because they come from the same manufacturer. Although I have seen some that they just have a cutoff runner in them. They don't have a radius entry runner like they should. I've seen a few of those. I wouldn't recommend those, obviously. They look like an unfinished intake manifold. But all of the other ones that are that sheet metal-y type thing, those don't make the power that the high ram does. And I'm sure that Amazon intake manifold is that. They just found the place to source it. So let's see. Gunmetal brute force intake. No, that's an AEM. It didn't come up under that. Let's see. Amazon LS intake manifold. I see them showing a lot of the these sniper-esque manifolds. Amazon LS1 intake manifold. Yeah, that's all the same thing. I don't know if has anybody ever tried any of these? Single plane. So they have Holly knockoffs. They have knockoff for everything, right? Wow. I've never looked on Amazon for LS intake manifolds, but man, they've got all the stuff. A premium single plane mid-rise intake manifold compatible with GM LS1, LS2, LS6. And they have the dual plane too. So those are probably all Holley knockoffs, I'm imagining. Wow. How fun it would be to be in business and have all that stuff copied. And I don't think that I would trust an Amazon. Has anybody ever used one of their valve or one of their throttle bodies? I don't think I'd trust an Amazon intake manifold. I've tried a couple of the inexpensive throttle bodies, and none of them have sealed. And at least two of them have just stuck. The blade sticks. Chrysler did have 2 feet intake. I think that they were actually longer than that, but the Sonic Ram was like that. Sean, random off-topic question. You can answer. You can ask any question that you like. I have fully forged LQ4, sloppy best, and the 7875. Without fuel in the equation, do you think my car can grab 1,000 wheel horsepower given the turbo size? No, I don't. I don't think a 7875 is going to support 1,000 at the tire. I think it might support a Gen 2 7875, like from VS Racing. That size turbo can do 1,000 at the flywheel. I don't know if it'll do 1,000 wheel. A real Garrett of that size would do that, but not the knockoff stuff. Next gen 7875. Yeah, that's more of 1,000 flywheel horsepower turbo. Not 1,000 at the tire. But the guys from Viren will be able to tell you. I'm sure that he's had guys max those out. What's the max timing you give an NA53 that just has a 585? The lift of the cam tells me nothing about it. But actually, what I need to know more than anything are what cylinder heads you have. And is it a stock, like piston assembly? Is it a LM7? Is it an L33? When the way that we run those motors, they run best at 29 degrees of timing at the power peak. It's less below that. But we are running it cold and with cold air going to it. Usually on the dyno, on a chassis dyno or on the street, they will tolerate less timing than that. You won't, unless you have good gas in it, you won't be able to get it. And we're doing all our testing on 91, but like I said, it's 91 plus it's cold. So it will take a lot more timing and without detonating. And so that's where it's going to make peak power. If you can give it enough octane, that's normally where it will be. But most times in the car running between 180 and 200 degrees, and I don't know whether you're grabbing hot air or whatever you're grabbing from the engine compartment. Hopefully you have a cold air intake to it. You should. If not, you won't be able to get away with that much timing. It's in a Miata. I don't think you need to worry about 1,000 wheel horsepower in a Miata. Then I think you need to be worried about putting like 400 or 500 down first and then see what happens. 862 head, stock L33 bottom end. Okay. Do you know Sally's Garage? No, I don't. Is that a YouTube channel? I haven't never seen it. Justin, I was giving it 31 by 3,500. Car was at 215 degrees. It will never want 31 degrees at 3,500 RPM. In fact, it won't want 31 degrees ever. Maybe if it's carbureted and you have an MSD on it, because that's going to have 2 degrees of retard in it. But that's way too much. It's going to want in the low 20s at 3,500. You already made 600. I bet in the 600 horsepower in a Miata is got to be pretty fun. We had a 310 or 20 at the tire 5-liter Ford in a Miata, and it was almost 170-mile-an-hour cart, not in the quarter, but just we drove it at the Silver State. But it was a lot of fun. With twice that power, it would be awesome. Yeah, Justin, what you're going to do is end up hurting it with that much timing. It's not going to be happy. Because it's not going to want at 3,500 is going to be before the torque peak, so it's going to want less timing. It'd be in the low 20s there. He has a channel that has an AMC that has a lot of AMC stuff, and he recently bought an AMX. It's a drag car that hasn't run since the 90s. Oh, that's cool. So, Scott, you're combining them. That happens. On a side note, could you do HP tuners tuning videos for beginners, kind of like Kyle from Goat Road Garage? His series was fantastic. I think that'd boost your channel. No, I can't do that. If you do want tuning stuff from HP tuners, I would go see Kyle at Goat Road Garage because he does a really good job. I don't ever tune with it. I have no idea how to use HP tuners. I've never even tried. All of my tuning on the engine dyno is not with a factory ECU. It's with a Holley or a Fast, or now a MS3 Pro from Megasquirt. And that makes it a lot faster and easier to get all of the testing done that I need to get testing. Because the tuning is not a difficult part of this. It's not even really part of the equation. I mean, we optimize the tune, but that's like a given. If we want the airfield to be 11.5 on all of the runs, then it has to be 11.5. And it's really easy to make it that. The 401 was refreshed in the 90s, never ran. They checked it out and looked brand new. Cool. So, Scott, you said next time on the wedding. Do you trust the auto tune on Hollies? I don't ever use it. Brule uses it a lot when because he wants the thing to be. He's a lot more interested, I think, in the drivability portion of the map. Like, I don't even care about the rest of the map. I'll occasionally, just so when Eric or Ish walk in, so that they see that the map has been interpolated. But I normally just get the thing to idle and then transition from the idle up to the wide open throttle start point, which is 2,500 or 3,000 or wherever it is. And then I tune the top 3 cells. And then what I'll do is interpolate the top to the bottom, just so that when you look at the map, it looks presentable. But honestly, I don't care about what's going on there because I never use any of that. We go from like an idle, and does it take throttle? Yes, it takes throttle. And what is the air fuel during the roll-in? During the roll-in, it's 12-1 or whatever is perfectly safe for a roll-in. And what is it when it gets stationary at 2,500 or 3,000 RPM? Is that plenty safe? Yes. And has low timing? Yes. And then you release it. And then does it, if it's an NA motor, does it go 12.2, 12.5, or whatever the number that you want to go through? We try a bunch of different ones just to see if there's any change in power. But quite honestly, the difference between 13.0 and 12.8 and 12.5 is very, very minimal. So we start off with the runs. I'll do a short run from 3,000 to 4,000 or 4,500 if the air fuel is okay. If not, we shut it off, and then I tune it. And then usually, because we have so many programs, so I have so many files that I could just go to and use this to get started with. And then, oh, but we had a bigger injector, so I add 10 or 20% of fuel, and then it's close. It's going to be close. And then so we make a run and go, oh yeah, here it was 11.8 here, but it was only 12.2 here, and then it's a couple of clicks and adjust. And then pretty soon you're making runs, and then we get the air fuel, and then we start playing with timing, because all this stuff, all the initial stuff is done with really low timing. And then we adjust the timing, and then it's done. It's really on an LS motor, it's 5 or 6 pulls, and the thing is making the most power that it's going to make. Off-topic question here, but what is the red assembly grease that you apply on the crank and rods using the picture of the video? That one was probably from Redline oil, I would imagine. Or it may have been Lucas also had a red one that they used a way back. And I'm just going to the cabinet there at West Tech as what they have. We've got a few different assembly loops. There's nothing that I think is magic or special. I use oil if I'm going to put the motor together there, at West Tech and then run it immediately. I just use oil because we're going to, unless I have a flat tappet cam, then I do something different. But like on an LS, it all just gets oil. And then we cap everything, pressurize the, fill it full of oil and put the line up to the dyno to register the oil pressure, put a filter on, all that stuff. We cap everything. We put 2 pounds roughly of pressure in the crankcase to push oil up into the pump. And then we spin the motor over with no plugs in it. And then we spin it over, and then the pump usually immediately primes and catches. Because before we put the pump in, obviously we put oil in the pump and make sure that it spins without chewing itself to death. And also when you do that, it adds a seal so that it will grab the oil and suck it up. And then we see oil pressure immediately on the dyno, on the readout, and also we have a mechanical gauge there too that the line goes to. And then so we spin it over, and hey, it's getting 40, 50, whatever PSI of oil pressure while it's cranking. And then we know that it's okay to start the motor. We'll do that with others like small block Chevys or big blocks or whatever that have a distributor. We'll take that out. We'll put an oil pump drive in it. We'll spin it with a drill. And then while we're doing that, we're also setting the lash on all the lifters, whether it's a solid or flat tap or whatever, because we're making sure that each one of them have oil up to the rocker. And that's when we know it's okay to start. After that, then it'll start and should run good. Richard just joined the stream, but did watch the video test where the heads used 12 degree like an actual. They were a factory LS7 head that was reported by Bischoff. The throttle body that they used on the MSD, I believe, was a 102 and not a 105. But an MSD is a lot better than stock. It's not just a little bit better. It's a lot better than stock, even with 102 millimeter throttle body. A 105, I don't think is going to gain you very much. It may have gained something on this combination, but the difference in flow rate between those throttle bodies is not dramatic. The thing that I wanted to talk about on the other thing that I want to talk about on the intake manifolds on the testing for the LS7 was it makes me want to test a ported version. I'm pretty sure that this was an ASCAS version. People talk about, oh, this has all the sharp edges and it does all these things. I've tested ported versions of FASTs and other manifolds and have so far been underwhelmed by what they did. So I'd like to see a ported version where it actually does something. I want to see it make power, but I just have not seen that yet. And one of the things I'd like to see is somebody, I think Mamo does MSD intake manifolds. I'd like to see Tony's MSD version and see it make power. And on anything, if it's 730, nearly 40 horsepower, it should be able to add power over a stock one if it's going to. How's our poll doing? 72% think that it is going to make more power with shorter runners. I think that's probably true. I think. Yeah, the motor did good. 740 horsepower. That's pretty good. And that's not even a custom cam. That's a shelf cam. I think it had, I'm pretty sure they were stock rockers. They were poured, the heads were milled too. So the compression was fairly high. It was 12.5 to 1. Building a Dart block 427. That's why I've been watching this 427 test. Undecided on heads yet, but it'll be a LLSR setup looking for 800 at the crank. NA. Yeah, you got to run lots of RPM for that, but Back in the day, people would have killed for a blown 355, make it 740. That'd have been a lot back in the day. If you had a 740 horsepower supercharged 5-liter, you were lying. You had a 347 or a 351 or a 408, but still, you're right. That is a lot of power. I'd like to see an 800 horsepower NA 427. It's going to be very high compression. I'm trying to think there's got to be some good heads to use. They make heads that flow, make LS7 heads that flow 400 CFM. So 800 horsepower is possible. On my 429 stock bottom end, can I run stock heads on a mother thumper cam? What intake would you recommend? I don't think you can. I don't think that a stock head, I don't think has retainer to seal clearance. I don't know what year that 429 is. I mean, that would make a difference, but I don't think it has retainer seal clearance for that. You'd have to check that. Obviously, stock springs are not going to work. You're going to have springs, but I don't know that you're going to have piston to valve clearance for that unless the factory pistons have some kind of valve relief in them. Hot rod dude, it would be a good idea. Go talk to Brian. He's going to tell you if you want to make something that has that much power, you need to do an LT1. They have stuff that's up near there. But are you going to do it are you going to run methanol on it? There's some roundy round guys make 800 with 440 stuff. Yeah, I've seen 440 stuff. And in fact, the SAM guys and other drag racers are into 4-digit power level stuff with that. But it's really high RPM though. I think it's 5-digit power level stuff, 5-digit RPM stuff. Yeah, and it's not cheap. I'm sure that's going to be a dry sump motor, right? And not just a LS7 dry sump, like a dry sump. My boys in Florida helped me, Dr. Toonhill and Bobby that used to work at Cam Motion. Okay. I'll be curious to see what heads you choose for that and what intake manifold that you choose. Because it's going to want to run. My intake interest here is for an LSX 454 and Frankenstein ported heads. Only cam I've seen specifically for the LSX 454 is a Mass Demon with 666 lift, close to the BTR cam. Somebody was asking me last night about where the crossover was between a fast and a single plane. And in this case, it was a mast intake manifold. I found that data, and this was on a 468 with a pretty good sized cam in it. The crossover was 5,900. So whoever was asking me about that, that's the crossover point. Five-digit horsepower. Yeah. 5-digit RPM. Yeah. 10,000 or something like that. 5-digit horsepower would be a lot. 1,000. So that's 10,000. So that's top fuel stuff. That would be a bunch. 93 pump for cruising, but may use E85 for racing on your 800 horsepower NA motor. Have to soften those chambers. BTR stage 3 cam, long tube headers on my 6.2 Silverado. What do you think the gain will be? What's in it now? Is it a your 6.2 Silverado? What is that? Is that a L92s? And what is it? What motor is in it right now? Compression ratio is 12-1, but Bobby and Nate's talking me into a set of mass because of the setup for solid rollers. Okay. BTR stage 3 cam. I mean, I don't see why you don't get 60 or something. What is an R6P8? The specs on the stage 4 cam that I use is a 246, 260 something, 662 lift, and a 111 LSA. Oh, a NASCAR engine from Dodge. Those are cheap. Those are really affordable. It's not going to run 12,000 RPM in a race. They won't allow that. There's no way they'll allow that sort of RPM in a race. What is the RPM ceiling for NASCAR motors? It's got to be. It can't be up. Can't be up there. Personal loans. That's not a good sign. Burial insurance I had. Wow. One racer recently said they hit 11,000 for a drag race, but it's kind of out there. Does seem like a lot. Does Pro Stock have an RPM limit too? I know they have a displacement limit. The Cup engines are impressive. Scrolling back, see if I missed anything. So we're going to go from top chat to live chat. 74% on our poll. 3/4 of them saying yes. NASCAR limits 10,000. So lucky for us, I always tell my kids, go look it up on your magic box. What are you doing here? Why aren't you doing what I'm asking? December 22nd, 2021, 670 horsepower. Engines were set to 8,500 RPM rev limit with a 9,200 RPM hard cut. I don't care about 2014. What I care about right now. NASCAR engines run between 8,500 and 9,000. They idle at 2,500. They can rev as much as 10,000. These engines can also reach temperatures up to 290 degrees. Wow. That's a lot. NASCAR engines compared to Formula One engines. end of 2014. That tells us nothing. $850 horsepower at 10,000 RPM. That's a lot. They sound good. They're definitely impressive. Hit the like button and save children. Since the EFI implementation, I'd like to see a cheap telescoping set of runners you could either smash or short or yank on the plenum to lengthen. HR Pro Stock limit 10.5, limited by ECU. Smash-O-Matic runner set. Yeah, Scott, those mountain motors are impressive. With lot, because that's the only thing better than a gigantic motor is one that's gigantic of like ingesting a massive amount of nitrous. Yeah, somebody mentioned, Sean mentioned Formula One stuff, 20,000+ RPM. Probably have those short rods and dimpled ports, or long rods. I'm sorry, I forgot which one made more power on the big end. I like the rules changes that are making them more viable again and pro modified. Flip pistons, laid back cylinder sets, all of those things. Dimple combustion chambers, that's right. They don't dimple the whole port, it's just a combustion chamber. What's the best quality turbo, Richard? I don't know, probably a Garrett. Whatever it is way out of my price range. Sean, it wasn't a K series. What do you think of a 429 with a Rattler cam? I've never run a Rattler cam. Is this a 429 Ford? Is this what you're talking about? Like a 429, 460, 385 engine base thing that you're talking about? Uh, 429 Ford. Okay, I've never run a Rattler cam, so I don't know anything about it. I've never tested it. I don't know exactly what you're trying to do with this 429. What year is it? Does it have stock heads on it? Is it a Super Cobra jet? If it is, then don't do anything to it. Just set it aside and go get another one from the wrecking yard and put that in, and then save the 429 Cobra jet or Super Cobra jet. But if it's just a 429 that you're wanting to build, and I need to know what compression it is and like mostly what you want to do with it. I know you need a 4-inch bore for the bigger heads, but for which bigger heads are you talking about? Are you talking about for the rec port heads? The rec port heads can be put on a 5.3 if you notch the top of the bore. But I want to do it because I want to do the video, but I think it's a terrible idea, especially on a 4.8, because it's your 4.8 is not going to take advantage. Your 4.8 is not going to make 600+ horsepower, which is what that head will support. It'll support 700 horsepower or thereabouts. Your 4.8's never going to get there. It's not going to use that. And I don't think with that valve size and that port volume, that coefficient of discharge, I don't think it's a good head for a 4.8 or a 5.3. I think a rec or a cathedral port head is a much better choice. That's not going to stop me from wanting to put it on there just so I can say that I put it on there. But I don't think I would do it if I were you. Or if you want to do it, then do something that I think is equally bad. Bore the 5.3 out to a 6-liter. Make it a 4-inch bore and then put that on there, and then you could have that running around. I want K24 heads on my V8. 4.8 with notch bores, LS7 heads. You have to notch the heck out of it to get the LS7 heads on there. 1 million RPM. Imagine a series of videos taming the B1 heads. What is a B1 head? So I need to know that first, and then I would have an idea of what we would need to do to make them behave at low RPM. Making cylinder heads behave at low RPM is actually not hard. You just put a tiny cam in it and a really long runner intake manifold. Will you test the Engine Quest Australian small bore LS7 heads that were just in Hot Rod? I didn't see them. I haven't seen an issue of Hot Rod in a really, really long time. Gigantic port Mopar RB heads. Okay, I'm not familiar with those. I'm not in the know. They're Mopar's re-entry into pro stock back in the day, and people still love them. Okay. Obviously, that's not a good low RPM head, but with fuel injection and the right runner, right intake manifold and the right camshaft, a pro stock head would work on a, I don't know how big of a bore motor you have to have for those heads. I don't know what the valve sizes are or what the combustion chamber out inside diameter is. I've never done anything with a flathead, although whenever I go down to Mark Sanchez's house, I sleep with one every night because there's one in that room. Did you know a certain Richard that used to write for Hot Rod Magazine periodically? Yeah. And MFer and Mustangs and Fords and stuff. Rec port or LS7 heads on a 383. Again, you can't do that on a 383 because the bore is too small for an LS7 head. And same thing with a rec port head. A rec port head, technically, because you still have just a 3900 bore, and you still have to notch the bore on it. If you're running a factory head, the most flow that you could get from a factory head, a 383 is big enough to utilize it if you put a big camshaft in there and the right intake manifold on there. But I don't know what notching would be required on the LS7. I've never mocked it up on a 3900 bore motor because that's what a 383 is going to be. You want a 12-cylinder Holden Hemi? I was watching Merlin's old school garage before this. We're putting in a high compression flatheads. I think a Model T. I like the Speed Demon used to be the Flatfire, and Vortec was involved in getting them to go fast with that car with a flathead in it, which I thought was really cool. Richard Diego, what's going on? This is going to be my first build for my truck. It's an LQ4 with a drop-in pistons from Texas Speed. I'm going to find a VS turbo for it. I'm going to be running a T6. Set up my goal is 800 to the wheel. Yeah, Byron will set you up with the turbo that will work for that. Aren't there LS3 heads with LS3 valves with the raised ports for the LS7? Maybe Frankenstein. I thought Mass did a small bore LS3 head, a small bore LS7 head that no, maybe they did a small bore LS3 head. I thought that they did one combination that allowed use of kind of what you're talking about. Would a PSI screw blower work more like a centrifugal or the roots? It's a positive displacement blower, so it's going to work like a twin screw, which is more like a roots blower. Crash. Be interesting at least to look into. What was your? I don't remember what your. Rec Porter L7 heads. I don't think I wouldn't ever try to put a set of stock LS7 heads on a 383. There's much better choices, depending on how much power you want to make. Richard, have you tested any of the eBay aluminum heads? I don't know who they're getting their stuff from, but maybe it's a Skip White kind of thing. Maybe they're all getting them from the same place. TSP makes a small bore LS7 head, I think. So you can put an LS7 on probably an LS3 bore then, I'm thinking. Because will the LS7 head go on a 4065 bore? Scott, you're going to try to get your OnlyFans thing working? Not too many people here tonight. 47. I'm surprised. Surprise. Should this 427 make more peak power with even shorter intake runners than the Holley High Ram? We're still 70-30. It's hot and humid. It is. I don't even have my fan on, but we do have the AC on right now. You took out Bambi with your leg? The OnlyFans is your side hustle. Mass did a small bore LS3 engine quest from Australia, making a cheap head with L7 port design and uses LS3 rockers. It will work on a 4-inch bore. Page 56 of Hot Rod. Game changer by Hunkins. Oh. I don't think it's a game changer. I don't think that the LS market is lacking for cylinder head choices, but I could be wrong. The problem with a small bore LS7 is the lack of lots of intake manifolds like you have for the LS3 stuff. But it would be interesting to see what that does compared to just an LS3 head. So if they use LS3 rockers, that means they've changed the valve position then from an LS7. And also, if it uses LS3 rockers, they're not using 1.8 rockers in it. So it's an LS3 with a raised port then. The 4-cam Hemi was from Australia. I don't know if NUNO would do something like a 12-cylinder Holden Hemi. The 4.8 Windsor AFR 205, 242, 248 cam. Will it make peak power at 6,200 with an RPM air gap? I don't know. Let's go see where that 408 made peak power with a smaller cam. Let's see. Dyno results. Small block Ford. This is a 351 result. Stroker. 408. 408 TFS. It's a 600 horsepower cam. Where's the smaller one? $2018, was that far back? 2016? I thought that I ran that with the the XFI cam. Here we go, XFI. That's an XFI 248. Yeah, so that's a bigger cam. What? This was a single plane, though. I don't think it will. It doesn't even tell me what intake manifold is on there. No, I don't think it's gonna make peak power that high with a dual plane on it. With a single plane, it made it at 6,700, but that was with a big camshaft. Yeah, it made it at 6,700. Made peak torque at 5,100. And that was with the trick flow single plane intake manifold and probably a 950. Yeah, 950 trick flow single plane and a 950 XP. And that was with a 250, 254 cam. I just don't think it will. $242, $248. The RPM air gap, I think, is the thing that's going to hold it back. Yes, L3 raised port will work with L7 intakes, 895 bare, 1095 assembled. It says they make stock replacement L3 heads and they raise the port design. Okay. I wonder why they did that. I wonder if they gained anything by doing that. I wonder if it flows more with a raised port. Road racers like flat torque curves are slightly rising. Well, you would like a lot of RPM, and a rising torque curve would give you lots of RPM. Road racers typically they always want more power. Now they're taking the LS rocker setup on the Mopar stuff. Have you ever had a Ray Barton on the dyno? I mean a Ray Barton motor? I don't. Westech may have, but I never have. Richard, if I'm aiming for 600 wheel horsepower Hemi build, or is this tell me that this is a turbo horsepower, turbo combination, right? And not if it's a turbo combination, then you can do that easily with a 5.7. You don't need to have a 6.1 or 6.4. Yeah, then I wouldn't. Just 650 at the wheels is that's just a cam and springs, and you probably don't even have to port the head. What kind of upgrades or updates do you recommend for 1980 454 in a truck with 456 gears that's not raced? Why does it have 456 gears in it? Do you tow with it, or you want to spin the tires, or? What's an air gap worth over a standard performer? It should be worth power over a standard performer, but not over a performer RPM. Is your 1980 454? That's got to be carbureted, right? So it will respond to all the things: headers, camshaft, small cam, towing cam kind of thing, springs, rockers if you want. Was it camper special? Okay. Is the motor still run good? Just having was it originally a 454? Was it original in 1980? Did they offer that motor? Went to a junkyard and there were a billion Hemis and LSs. I see some Hemis there too. You just got to make sure that they're they're still alive. Just about all the coyotes were gone. I've never ever seen a coyote in the wrecking yard. I saw one truck that had one, but I mean, it should have had one, but it was gone. Single cab dually runs great. Yes, it's original. Then I would leave it alone. But if you want more power, the normal things all work. Long tube headers, small, 206, 212 camshafts and valve springs. Does it have a quadrajet on it? Cam, so you have a 429 Cobra jet. You should just set that aside and not build that. Well, you should have it be built stock. You should just go get a 460 from the wrecking yard. If you're just putting it in unless you just want it to be cool, which is also cool. About to put a video of me modernizing the Trex factory wiring harness. That's cool. Just ring cap and boost it. You could do that. I wish it was a Super Cobra jet, then I would want to run it on the dyno. I would like to run one of those. I think it's illegal for them to put coyotes on the yard, not sell it to buddies first. It wouldn't surprise me. It sure seems like that. I know that they're hard to find. Scott's out. Peace. And speaking of that, we've been here an hour. What are we doing? Carbon's an Elbrock, but everything else is stock intake and stock exhaust manifolds minus emissions. They're, I think that speaks to the failure rate of Hemis and Coyotes. I mean, you see Hemis or Coyotes for sale, but they're sold as takeout things. So guys are making money on those because those are big money. Carbs and Edelbrock. Does it run good with the Edelbrock? And the Hemis that are in there are all going to be the early things. Salt truck to need the Coyotes. So we're going to go ahead and end our poll at 67.33. I think it probably should make more power with a short runner on it. And that note, it's time once again for Shadow Ops Relate. I'm just leaving. 0-inch long runners. Yeah, we've seen some of those on blower manifolds. If boosting, would you go the newer low mileage 5.7 or an older 6.1? I would use the new 5.7. If you have the ability to control the variable intake and variable cam timing, that's a good motor. I like the one that we ran on the guys from West Tech ran. in Motor Trend. They had one, and it made good power. It made good average power, and they put a camshaft in it, and it made good power with the cam. And I like the variable intake manifold. I like having a 2-stage intake manifold. Some are used for warranty swaps. It's from the wrecking yard? That doesn't seem kosher. Okay, guys, I got to get going, but I will be back. And, well, I might not see you guys tomorrow. We'll have to see. I'll let you know. Maybe I'll do a live feed from the wilderness. But I'll see you later.